Hi, I'm Ian Robinson. So I've written 2 series at the moment with the book folks. One is National Moretti, and the current one that's just coming out is what I call my Sam Batford series, which starts with criminal justice.
Okay. I'm Traude Aillinger. I've written a story of cozy mysteries set in Edinburgh, the Edinburgh murders.
I'm John Dean. I'm the creator of DCI John Blizzard and Jack Harris.
I'm James Davidson. I'm new to the book, folks. You find me on the back page of the catalogue if you look carefully. We just have 2 books out. Our 3rd one is coming soon. I'm very happy to be here.
And we're all published by the book folks, so we're delighted to welcome 3 members of their team who've come from the wild south up into the north. So welcome, guys, and thank you for making the journey. In this conversation, and we'll see where it goes, really. We've done a bit of planning, but not much in the way of planning, so we'll see where we go, really. We wanted to do starts because we wanted to look at how careers begin and give you an insight into the kind of challenges that writers face getting started in the first place, and also interspersing it cleverly and seamlessly with how stories begin and how, as writers, we grab you by the lapel and make sure you never ever leave us. So I thought I'd ask first of all, Ian, how did you start? When did you know you wanted to be a writer?
Well, I joined the Met Police at the tender age of 19 in 1990. So there's many people that might say, well, being in the police, you'd have been writing fiction from the start. It's not true for the purposes of YouTube camera. But I did 27 years, and I ended up with a disability, which was not police related. So I had to work out, well, what am I going to do now? And effectively, I just thought, well, I'm going to be sat down a lot, so I'll try and write a book. And there was a local publisher to me at the time in Harpenden, No Exit Press, and they came out with a short story competition. And I thought, well, because I live locally, this is how naive I was, I'll write a short story and they're bound to pick me up because I only live down the road, and they'll just come along and they'll just go, well, we can work with you that way. Which obviously didn't happen. Anyway, I got down to the final 3. And the beginning of that was the first part of this book, Criminal Justice. And I thought, well, I've been judged as being able to write. I left school with nothing, so I thought I'll give it a go, and this was the result. Out of that. That's how it was.
See, it's interesting because I think probably from the first age that I knew you could write stories as well as read them, and I'm talking 4 or 5 years old, I knew I wanted to be a writer. And I was lucky because my dad was a librarian and mother at the time wasn't a poet but went on to become a working poet. And I was lucky, and a lot of writers will say this, that I had a couple of teachers who encouraged me to write. One of them, Judith Kent at primary school, one of them, Tom Cowley at comprehensive school. And I think, a lot of writers will tell you they were influenced by teachers. And that sort of kept me going and kept the fire going, really. And after that, it only took about 35 years for me to get the first publishing contract. And I think that's the thing that struck me, from about the start of my career, that it's bloody difficult.
So there is hope then, 35 years, John, I'm like 10 years in. So
yeah. But certainly I always knew I wanted to be a writer. And when I knew that I got loads of rejections, when I knew that wasn't going to happen, I became a journalist and then went back to writing later on. What about you?
Very similar story. I always knew I wanted to be a writer. And as far as starts are concerned, I can say I've made a lot of false starts. I wrote 9 novels before I got published. So I've been writing for more than 2 decades now. Really passed through the pain barrier of failure. And I could definitely say that starts are probably the most important thing. That's really what I had to learn. You've got to have a great start. You've got to jump right in. You've got to catch the reader's attention. And
we'll come back to that because you're absolutely right. That's crucial. What about you? How did you start?
I started writing short stories as a teenager, but they tended to be the result of some internal upheaval, and then I would wake up and feverishly scribble down a story and type it up the next day. But they wouldn't have won me any literary prizes, but at least I had some sort of therapeutic function. But after I'd lived in Scotland for over 10 years, I felt I was losing the connection with my mother tongue. I was beginning to start to search for words in German, and I thought that the discipline of writing would preserve and revive my skills, and that's how I started writing my first novels, a couple of novels in German. The first one miraculously was published, the second one sadly not. And then there was life happened, there was a hiatus of many years, really. But I missed writing so much that I really felt I had to start again. But this time it felt right to do it in English. And that's how the Edinburgh Murders series came to be.
It's interesting you say that, because a number of people say to me, "Why do you write?" And I'd simply say, because I can't not.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I wasn't being published, I'd still write, really. But how do you deal with setbacks? Because all of us will be sitting here with stories of rejections and all sorts. Do you have to grow tough?
I was lucky because I've always had people who believed in me and who supported me through those times when you get one rejection after another, or you're ignored, which is even worse.
Yeah.
And I felt the only way to get through this is to keep writing, because at least then you do something that you enjoy doing that time.
So we'll talk about starts of books, really. I mean, I think from my point of view, the most important words you ever write in a novel will be the first 200. Increasingly, we live in a world where readers have less attention span. In a world of Amazon, where if something doesn't happen in the first 10 lines, people will switch off, really. So it's absolutely crucial that you start with something that grabs the reader. It's like your hands coming out of the page, grabbing them by the lapel and saying, "You will never ever get away from me." And that's absolutely crucial, because the modern reader, I mean, it's a bit of a generalisation, but we'll get to the end of the first page, and if they're not gripped, we'll actually go and find something else very often. So how do you start? How do you go from a blank page? Do you just start writing, or do you think a lot?
Oh no, I do an awful lot of planning first before I start. Weeks of just planning and jotting down the story in chronological order, just describing what happens exactly in the story. So 10-15 pages or so.
So you won't write anything?
No.
Until
until I know exactly where I'm going. So starting to write the novel, that's maybe the fourth stage that I go through.
What about you, Ian?
It's impressive. I might pass to James. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I think I approach each book from a place of fear, to be fair. I have an idea, and I have a blank page. I know that if I don't know the characters, they've got to kind of come to me at that point. But no, I mean, I normally I might have a starting point, and I just work off that, or I know what the end result is I need to go to. But anything in between, I have absolutely no idea about as I'm writing. And but one thing I have to do is in similar way to you plan and plot it, I have to write daily in order to keep up with the investigation in my head. Because if I lose that, then the two people at the back there will be feeding that back to me in my edits, saying, "What?" Question mark. And if they're up, then spot on. I mean, they've saved me.
It's an interesting point, because I work with a guy who's a children's writer. He got his first published book a couple of years ago, and he always says, if you want to be a writer, write. And he said 99 times out of 100 it'll be rubbish, and you'll hit delete at the end of the day. But day 100 you'll hit the gold scene, and suddenly you'll get a story or a book or whatever. And he's absolutely right. If you want to be a writer, do some writing. How do you start?
Yeah, I'm not a planner, to be honest with you. I sometimes wonder if I should be, but I find for me that actually I kind of need to do without the restrictions in order to get to the spontaneity that I'm looking for. And there's a beautiful quote from Donald Barthelemy, the American writer, who said, "A writer is one who sets out to do something without knowing what that thing is. And so I think that sort of embracing the unknown is what enables the real creativity. So what I'm always trying to capture is a certain energy, like trying to find what it is that energizes me in these ideas, and then keep that hot as I'm going along. So I try to write without inhibitions, and that's why I don't like too much of a plan, and I don't like too many rules either. I won't talk about editing now because we'll talk about that later, but I think that's for editing where that comes in. We start to bring more structure. I think Stephen King's interesting on this topic. He tries to write fast. He writes 2,000 words a day. He's very committed, and that's what lends a certain feverish intensity to his writing. You can tell that they've been written fast, arguably too fast at times, and that's why sometimes the endings can be anticlimactic if he's not watching this video. But that's what I...
Apparently he watches all the Kirkcudbright.
such a great supporter of writers, is Steve. He is, actually. He is.
Ian, do you want to read something from your book?
Not really, John, but I will do now. I will. So, this series begins with criminal justice. It's quite a gritty, what I would call hard-boiled noir detective fiction. So if you like your crime kind of sedate, cozier, then I would still say give this a go. Seriously, no, I would say give it a go, because you'll be quite surprised that you think, oh, actually, yeah, I quite enjoy this. It's described as a criminal justice, a heart-pounding, covert cop action adventure. And, if I say so myself, it definitely is. So, I'm going to read to you the prologue. So, it's written in the first person of DS Sam Batford, and then third person with the DCI Clara Winter on the National Crime Agency, but she is writing from her decision logs. So that enabled me to do the two voices rather than have her in first person too. Okay? So, prologue. Never wear slippers to a kicking. Ben Hamer should have listened to this advice, but he didn't. Big G is down 2 million. Hamer is Big G's accountant. He'd done all right until he worked both ends of the chain and started talking to the old Bill about Big G's money. Even amongst criminals there's a code of conduct, and Hamer has breached that line. That's where I come in. Purely as a subcontractor, someone who rectifies business transactions that have gone awry. I see myself as a 21st century bounty hunter. The first rule of any hunt. This applies to the hunted as well as the hunter. That's why I've been so successful. Big G knows how to get hold of me, but we've never met. In the end, it's about discipline, and Hamer lacks it. I was raised on discipline, something my old man was keen on. I have the buckle scars on my back to prove it. My mum also took her fair share. She shouldn't have intervened. Childhood prepared me for the army, which educated me for life, and also prepared me to kill. Another bonus. Second rule, know the target. The army was keen on this message, as friendly fire is frowned upon. But it's not always easy to know who your friends are. Here I am, an ex-soldier turned cop who joined the Met Special Ops. Recently got seconded to the National Crime Agency, and right now I'm working undercover as a driver for a drug syndicate. So that's simple. Despite all those bosses, my real loyalty is only ever to my own interests. This is it. I'm about to cross the Rubicon, and once I do, there's no turning back. I pull my polo neck up over my jaw, and my cap peek down. My gloves feel like skin, and the grip on the lighter is good. The flame ignites with the first flick of my thumb. I move towards the end of the fuel line and look up for one final check. I hear another engine, not a car. Hamer turns towards me, and his eyes briefly catch mine. I sense a glimmer of recognition. Then he looks away towards the road. I freeze. Darkness turns to light, and he's gone. So now I'll continue with the sensitive log, which is the DCI's. Sensitive decision log for DCI Clara Winter, NCA, 10th of August, 0800 hours. I and no other person will make all entries. I will record both views and thoughts of individuals and the inquiry. I will not be disclosing these records to the defence as they contain sensitive information pertaining to covert methods. The CPS will guide me when and if required. The log is concerned with Operation Storm, a National Crime Agency inquiry into a subject known as Vincenzo Gardino, aka Big G, and his associates, concerned in the importation of Class A drugs and firearms in the UK. The log will detail my thoughts and decisions concerning covert assets and their use during this inquiry. This is a major inquiry and will use the Holmes system for recording actions and all non-sensitive records relating to the operation. I'm short-staffed, but who isn't? I've requested more staff, but we'll have to wait to see how the investigation progresses in this lifestyle phase. I'm satisfied I can continue without jeopardising officer safety. Log started in relation to secondment of an undercover officer from the Metropolitan Police Covert Policing MO3. This hasn't been requested by myself and is not wanted in relation to this investigation. I have sufficient cover at present in relation to the target that doesn't warrant the use of a UCO employed direct in the organised criminal network. I've been called this morning by Commander Helen Barnes, Metropolitan Police Service Specialist Operations Command, and been directed that they will employ the UCO on my operation as to a wider remit of national security, the reasons for which they will not brief me on. The UCO is DS Sam Batford. I don't understand who the fuck she thinks she is, foisting this methodology on me at this stage in the investigation, and I have no alternative course of action I can take. DS Batford will meet with me later today, where he will be left in no uncertain terms as to my displeasure at their arrival, and my expectations are being kept updated as to their findings in the course of my inquiry. I feel my inclusion on the fast-track promotion scheme and recent promotion to DCI is irksome to the MPS and Commander Barnes. The MPS will meet all funding in relation to the UCO. As far as I'm concerned, they will be lucky to get a cup of tea out of me. Entry complete.
Yeah, good. So in terms of the beginnings of stories, you have a number of choices. You can introduce a character that's so compelling that you want to read about that character, whatever happens, or you can introduce, a plot line that fascinates the reader. How do you go through? What do you set out to do to get the reader reading from line one?
Yes, you want to create a question in the reader's mind, like you say, so that they want answered, and not just the overall who done it question, but also in each chapter, in each paragraph, some things that makes them want to read on. But I agree with you that for me personally, as a reader, the characters are crucial. If I don't want to go on that journey with them, then it doesn't matter how many bodies or crashed cars pile up in the story, then I'll lose interest.
Yes, I was going to ask, because that's one of the other crucial things that you need. You need setting, plot and characters. Where do the characters come from? Where are they real people walking around, or do you invent them completely?
Well, I've actually tried a bit of an experimental method in these books and trying to apply some ideas from Carl Jung. Carl Jung in the 1920s tried to attempt the first sort of definition of personality and came up with different personality types. So one of my detectives is based on Jung's idea of the thinking type. The way he describes this type, it struck me straight away as almost like a description of Sherlock Holmes or a classic detective. It's somebody who is rigorously logical, with clarity, able to see things that the rest of us can't see. They prioritize logic over everything. For this reason, they have problems because their emotions can be undervalued or underdeveloped, so they're often loners, they often have difficulties conforming, and they often have to work outside normal institutions. So it took a lot of Jung's ideas to create this character. It's been a bit of an experiment, but based on some of the feedback we've received, I think it's working quite well.
What about, are your characters people you met during your time with the police, or are they?
No. Definitely not.
Would they recognise themselves?
No. I mean, there's no doubt. In 30 odd years, there's different people you meet are going to come across the page of your book. But any specific person or not, definitely not. And certainly the DS Sam Batford, I had fun writing him because he is the complete opposite to me. And the complete opposite to how I've been in the police. I mean, if I was to write from my own perspective as a DS in the Met, it would be very dull reading and very dull for me to create. So I was trained for my covert role in anti-corruption, so I was able to kind of bring some of those elements in, and then as I was writing, because I don't plan, as I said, it was quite surprising because I'd be writing things, oh my God, he's never going to do that. And of course I was writing out what he was doing. So it was, that for me was quite interesting because then that took me to other places in the book and helped me explore different areas. It ended up quite fun to write.
And the third thing is settings, and I think writers are inspired by three things really: plot, place, people. And by and large, you can break it down. And people here in the room who are writers of fiction, you'll recognise one of those types. It's not a generalisation, it's not every time, but certainly for me it tends to be place. I get inspired by place, and if I get the place right, the rest comes from it really. There's a writer that I taught in Darlington for many years and is now a book folks writer. And I set him an exercise really years ago. It was I learned a lesson from it. It was a settings exercise. I think I got him to describe a street or something. And I said, right, you've got 5 minutes to describe this street. And normally he would set off and write and write and write. And he didn't move. And after 2 or 3 minutes I said, well, what's the problem? He said, I can't do it. I can't do a street without people in it. Because I'm character people. I'm a character writer. I said, well, put people in it, for God's sake. And writers will be inspired by a number of things. I'm inspired by place. I will go to a place and think, whatever I write, whatever the story is, I don't really care, as long as it happens here. And since I moved to Dumfries and Galloway, it's magnificent for inspiration. We've got 2 dogs now. I always said to the family that I don't want dogs because they tie you down. And so we had a family vote and we had democracy and I lost 3-1. So now we have 2 wonderful dogs. And you walk miles and miles and you just think, because there's nothing else to do apart from clean up poo. And I found myself looking more and more and looking at hillsides and ravines and all that kind of stuff and being inspired.